Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres, joining you live from the far Barcelona. And I'm joined by my dear co-host, Christina Nicolau, who's joining us from no other place than her house in Athens, Greece. Hello, Christina.
Hi,
How are you?
Daniel. I'm doing very well. Athens is getting into an autumn or fall mood, I guess, but still we enjoy some sun.
Nice. Yes. Not here. And actually, we're bringing a guest today that's actually from somewhere quite close to me, based in Madrid. I think, Christina, is it the first time we bring someone based in Madrid? I can't think of anyone before her.
Me neither, but I would have to check because we have a bit of few episodes in the hundreds, I guess, now. So we would have to check.
Christina, you have to know the number. It's right now as we speak, it's 267. It's like...
Yes, but I don't know in how many of these were with me. I don't remember by heart. So this number, I need to check.
Yeah, I don't know this number. We should count it one day. We should have a counter one day of the episodes that I've done, which are practically all of them, the ones that you've done and the ones that Efrain have done. And I know we have a competition later of who has more episodes on our top 10, if you or Efrain. The last time we checked, I think you won.
Last time I did win, but let's say that this half results were a little bit, I need to do better.
Actually, we'll have to, we recently updated our top 10 and it's actually got very interesting because we have some episodes that are actually getting a lot of downloads lately. And no pressure, but I think that today's episode will also be, I don't know if top 10 because there's a lot of episodes, so maybe we won't put so much pressure, but I think maybe top 20 at least, because we're going to talk, I think, right? We're going to talk about FMCG, going to talk about careers, and we're going to talk about a topic that I think is very important and very dear to all of us, which is why are there not more women in leadership positions? Actually, Christina, let me ask you, why are there not more women in leadership positions in FMCG, just to get it started?
Well, I think that we've touched briefly on that on other podcasts as well, other episodes. Indeed, there has been a lot of progress and we need to celebrate and acknowledge progress, but still there is a long way to go, even when there are quotas or companies trying to reach ESG goals and so on. As long as there isn't a solid strategy from the bottom up and a good understanding of how also biases work within the workplace and the right support system, it's going to take quite a bit of time to be able to see meaningful change when it comes to numbers.
Yeah, for sure. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest today, all the way from Madrid, Spain. It's Helen Tomlinson, who's actually the new GM of Spain of Kenvue. Hi, Helen. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Christine. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I'm joining from a very sunny Madrid, where it seems it's still summer, actually. So we're making the most of the last days of the sun here. But it's great to be.
By the way, the other day, when we were having a call talking about the podcast, you made a confession to me, which is something that, I don't like to hear, but I'll keep it in mind, which is that since you've been in Madrid, you've become a Real Madrid fan. So I think it's in October that we'll play against you and we'll have to beat you guys, obviously.
Let's see. Let's hope we do better this year.
We'll see if you play with 11 players or you play with 11 players and the referee. That will probably make the difference.
Ooh.
That's what they all say.
And of course, Helen, as a Real Madrid fan, is wearing white today. So that's good to wear the colors. I'm not wearing the Barca colors, but the Barca colors are probably harder to wear in a day-to-day.
So I'm curious, anyway, how many downloads do we need to get to be in the top 20 from today's podcast?
Oh, probably like way over 1,000, actually. So... Well, I think we can get there. So, Helen, I'd like to ask you, how did you end up working in FMCG?
Good question. And I guess it all started with my grandfather. So a very, very long time ago. But I think just to give you a bit of context, so I'm from the UK. I grew up in the northwest of England in a very small village. And back in the day, I guess the ambition for women was, get educated and then get married, have children. And it wasn't so much focus on kind of careers and moving away, actually, from the area. And my grandfather was really inspirational for me and really believed in my capabilities. And actually, he wanted me to be a nurse, but I don't have so much patience. I don't think I haven't had enough patience for that. To be a nurse. I also hate needles, so I think that just would not have been a good combination. But I think he inspired me to want to make an impact, to want to, make an impact on people, to do something that makes a difference. And I guess with this in mind and a bit of kind of expanding my horizons, I found the world of FMCG, but specifically healthcare. So, I started working at GSK 20 years ago, started on the FMCG side, so drinks brands, and then moved into healthcare, which I guess is where I really sort of felt connected with this kind of purpose and inspiration that I'd had, from a very young age.
But 20 years ago, GSK, like you've been in the sector for quite some time. Tell us a bit, how have you seen the sector evolving, like biggest changes that you have observed?
Biggest changes, I would say digitalization. One of the biggest ones, I guess, not only the evolution of e-commerce, which, clearly introduction of Amazon into the sector has had a huge change. But I think also with shifting media, so from very traditional media more into digital media, digital targeted media in terms of communication to consumers, but also accelerated by COVID, kind of working in a virtual reality. So the shift from everything needing to be presential, face-to-face, and especially when you think about connecting with sales teams, HCPs, there was a stage where this was all, the focus was very much on face-to-face interactions for training, development, anything like that. Whereas I think, now we've shifted to a much more hybrid model. I think that's probably one of the big ones. Another big one, again, I would say accelerated by COVID, is the shift towards self-care. So prevention versus, treatment. And I think this is something that we still see more and more. And I would say before COVID, yes, we used to talk about self-care and the role of prevention versus treatment, but it was really, people were still focused on, I don't feel well, I'm going to treat. Then I think COVID came and we saw a huge boom in people taking supplements, vitamins, minerals, but it was still, I would say, quite generic. And what we've certainly seen over the last couple of years is, I would say, more personalization. And I think women's healthcare is a great example as a category that's really booming. It's one of the fastest growing categories in healthcare. And what we're seeing in that category is people want more personalized solutions. So instead, it was like I could take a multivitamin, which would cover 4 or 5 different needs. Whereas now it's like, no, okay, I am struggling with sleep. So I want something with melatonin, for example, that really tackles, the sleep challenges that people might have. So I think that's another area, which is self-care, and then more towards, okay, I want a product that is really personalized for whatever symptom is that I want to treat or whatever condition I want to prevent.
And I guess now with AI, I think we've had also this discussion at some point recently, Daniel, like getting into a ChatGPT and saying like, okay, here is what I'm experiencing. Now give me a specific plan that would work for me, and then also suggest me what would be the right products and so on. So getting very targeted and personalized in a digital way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's quite a valid use case as well for ChatGPT, like to know what type of vitamin you need for. Is it reliable for that?
I'm not an expert before I kind of respond.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is everybody is different. Everybody's body's different. Everybody's body responds differently to certain different products, to different medicines, or even just supplements. And so whilst I think you could start with ChatGPT, put in, your symptoms, what you're experiencing, a bit about your background. I think if you're going to embark on any sort of treatment, in inverted commas, it's always better to speak to a healthcare professional. So whilst I understand what you're saying, I think today, my personal view would be always check with a healthcare professional, even if it's just the pharmacist, because actually the pharmacy is a great source of information and education, one that is often underutilized. I think there's still in general across Europe tendency for people to go directly to the doctor, whereas actually, this is one of the other evolutions that we're seeing is pharmacy, are well-trained specialists and can offer a lot more advice and recommendation for specific needs.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Interesting. Helen, I wanted to quickly double click on and speaking of double clicking, your profile will be in the show notes. So if anyone wants to learn more about you, they can check your LinkedIn. But I think it's really interesting how you developed your career, like basically in sales, commercial roles in the UK, both account management, trade marketing, category management. And then you decided to go international. No, you did a GM role a couple of GM roles based in Bucharest with slightly different geographic responsibilities. Then you moved to Spain to become the head of Iberia for GSK Consumer Healthcare. Then you did an integration lead while you were doing that, and then an excellence project for several regions. Was all this planned?
Not exactly, no. I actually think that was the beauty of a lot of it. So I hadn't ever really considered leaving the UK. And I was really fortunate in that I had a mentor in GSK. And he was helping me navigate a little bit the future, what the possibilities might have been. And actually, it was him who suggested, well, firstly, have you ever thought about being a GM? And I hadn't. And then, have you thought about moving abroad? And again, I hadn't really. And so two things happened at the same time. One, that conversation with him. And through that conversation, we sat down, started to look at, what are the skills and experiences necessary to become a GM. And then at the same time, I had the opportunity to go to a global conference at GSK for a top leader conference. And it completely opened my eyes to the scale of the business outside of the UK. And so shortly after those two things happened, I was invited to participate in the interview process for the role of General Manager, Romania Adriatics. And so the rest is history. I got the role. I moved to Romania. I have to say that was probably the biggest personal and professional development situation that I've been in. I mean, I moved to Romania on my own. I didn't know anything about the country. Or how to be a GM, because the reality was it was my first time GM role. And it was an experience.
We're just discussing also before we started recording, right? Like that's kind of the region I'm working in right now. And as we're saying, let's say leadership style can be a little bit different. And also when it comes to attitude towards women, I've heard personally quite a few times, women being labeled as, behaving like men, or being, having the bias that women are perceived as way too aggressive or way too soft. What was your leadership style? How did you manage?
Great question. I have a belief that the more authentic you are, then the better you're able to lead. Because if you're leading in a way that's comfortable, then I think this shines through in how you show up, in your actions, and how you are. So I guess for me, it was around, I call it servant leadership. I think people often talk about this, but really I saw my role as being there to help the team. So to help accelerate growth, to help overcome any barriers or challenges that we had. I tend to listen more than I talk, ask a lot of questions, and seek input and expertise from other people. That I think sometimes, and especially actually in Romania, it was very much like, but you're the boss, you have to know everything. And that really isn't my style at all. And so for me, it was more around building a network and collaboration that could really help inform not only myself, but also the business, so we could take the right business decisions.
Yeah, it is in certain cultures, and I found that sometimes here, even like the people being scared of like speaking up and challenging. I mean, I think it happens everywhere actually, can be an issue.
No, I was just going to say, and yeah, so definitely the culture in Romania was people were in general scared to speak up. But what for me was interesting was that really changed depending on the age profile of the team. So you had much kind of younger generation who really wanted to drive change, who were eager to learn, and who were happy to speak up because I guess they'd lived in a different time than maybe older people in the organization who'd lived more through, the Ceausescu era in Romania, where, really speaking up was not the done thing. And so one of the things that I did in Romania was making sure that we combined groups that were multi-generational whenever we were working on projects. So you get the benefit of people with a lot of experience, but then also the younger kind of generation who are more open to speak up and to challenge.
Yeah. And I'm curious to know, like, you've probably seen both ends of the spectrum as a woman in leadership and with a big career. Mentors that championed you. You mentioned your grandfather. You mentioned the boss that you had at a time that asked you and prompted you ultimately to become a general manager. But people also willingly or unwillingly that have probably made you doubt or even try to derail your career. How have you navigated these moments? I don't know if there's been any big moments for you in one way or the other, and also, that you've been able like to not only stay true to yourself, but like become who you are today in some way.
So I think I'm lucky in that I would say I've had more champions and supporters than I have had of people trying to derail. And I think that's largely due to the culture in the companies where I've worked, especially in GSK. I think the culture of the company was really about championing diversity, very inclusive, collaborative environment. And I think when you have people who can champion, my experience of those kind of people, I guess, are, open-minded, support development, value diversity, because they've built diverse teams that have driven high performance. And, we know there are millions of studies that talk about the performance improvements that you get when you build diverse teams. I think to answer your question around, derailing, I think here, this is where the network really becomes important. Because, for example, if you're in a situation where you have a boss who maybe you don't have that great a relationship or there is some potential derailing going on, having a broader network of people within the organization who can sponsor you and champion you is really important. Because then you have more voices at a senior level talking, and supporting you. So I think, for me, it's been around leveraging that wider network and trying not to take things personally at the end of the day, and trusting in your own ability, in what the value you bring, what you can deliver.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, like, what made you or what drove you to build your network, even if it was just internally, because a lot of people are like, that's not in my payroll, or even like feel like kind of bad about doing that. They feel like maybe, I think it's a mix of imposter syndrome, something that they've never been asked to do it, but I think ultimately, it's all benefits, no? To be well known is good. So
many years ago, I was having a chat with a colleague of mine, and we talked about the opportunity pyramid. I think it's called opportunity or possibility pyramid. And this is this concept that, you have opportunities, possibilities, actions and results. And therefore the wider, and one starts at the bottom and they layer on top of each other. And basically the wider your base is, then the better the results. Are you kind of following how I'm explaining that?
Yeah.
And what it made me realize this conversation was the way to sort of increase your base of, opportunities and possibilities was really by having a broad network, and that relationships, I guess, are really fundamentally at the base. So the more relationships you have, the more possibilities that turn into opportunities, that turn into actions, that turn into results. And it was really visual because he drew this one day when we're having a coffee, and it kind of clicked something in my mind that actually, you may feel like it's not in your job description or it's not something that you should be doing right now, but having that network, having those conversations, it may not be an outcome that is for today or helps you in this very moment, but it's something that's going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, it's definitely a slow burn. It's something that you kind of have to do because you enjoy doing it, and then it will benefit you long term, rather than looking for, if you're expecting to get something out of networking tomorrow, I don't think you're gonna be disappointed, and maybe you won't be doing it again, no?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. So 2 years ago, I was a mentor for the Professional Women's Network.
Mm-hmm.
This is a global network, and I was one of the mentors in Spain. And how they do mentoring there is you kind of pick a subject, and then people join your mentoring program. And I did networking because I'd learnt this, a long time ago, when it's something that people comment about, the network I create, etc. And what was really interesting was those comments. So a bit like you said, so the women in there were saying, my boss doesn't, support me in promotions. I'm doing lots of work. My work's really great. But I don't have visibility, and I don't know how to build a network around of my direct manager. And so we talked a lot about how to do that. And a lot of women say, but I feel uncomfortable just writing to someone to say, hey, this is who I am. Can we have a conversation? And so we were talking about how to get comfortable reaching out to people, how to, phrase that kind of conversation, how to do it in a more natural way, and, the barriers and challenges. And so I think it's a really common experience that women have. And you just need to push yourself out of your comfort zone. I mean, that's literally what I did. And it was one of the reasons why, the Romania GM job came up, because I'd started to build a network, and it was actually with the people with whom I'd connected who had let me know that the job had come up and encouraged me to apply.
It's almost kind of like a set of skills that we also need to build, and that's also going to take some practice, and it won't always be comfortable. And to your point, Daniel, I'm not sure about the enjoying part, because you are an extrovert and a social butterfly, and we love you for it. Not everybody is built the same way, and that's absolutely okay. There are still some things that you need to do. But it's not only, building your network, it's also being part of other people's network and supporting them. And I have to say, Helen, in many groups I've been part of, there is this notion of women not really supporting women that much, or that being uncommon. Well, personally, I do mentor quite a lot of young women. What is your view on that? Do you think that's true?
I think that it's changed a lot. And I think the perception is probably worse than the reality. And I think that's because there are so few women in leadership roles. So I think, there's a perception thing there. And I guess in some industries and some situations, one of the phrases that I hear often is queen bee phenomenon. So there's only one role, and there can only be one person, and therefore the woman in that role is the queen bee, and feels that they need to protect their space. But I think part of this is just because women leaders are in general less visible. This morning I was having a conversation with another association in Spain called Ejicon. I don't know if you guys, Daniel, you might know it. And this is an organization who again is, promoting visibility and development of not just female talents, but female talents is definitely where it started. And we were talking about this subject of, how to become more visible. And I think a lot of that is, like you say, so having mentoring, building networks, and that can be within your organization, that can be joining external associations. And, there are many great external associations where you can go contribute, learn, and at the same time, build a network.
Yeah. And I asked Christina before, and I'm going to ask you directly, Helen, why do you think that after decades, or at least in the decade that I've worked, this diversity topic, and as we all know, it all goes on a bit in waves and trends, but it's been kind of front page and in theory a priority for companies. Why do you think that we are still in this situation? I mean, I don't really feel like we've moved the needle significantly in the last decade.
I think we have moved the needle. I'm not sure significantly, but I definitely think we've moved the needle. I think saying that we haven't is harsh. I don't know, Christine, if you agree with me or not.
I agree. As I said, there is progress and we need to celebrate progress and acknowledge it.
Yeah. And I think there are countries and companies who have made great progress. I saw a stat the other day that in Norway, 42% of public board positions are occupied by women. So I think that's great. There are companies who have really forward-thinking policies around, preventing bias, around quotas for female leadership, around family flexible policies, which help the advancement of women through leadership positions. But I think we still have a lot of industries that are male dominated. Networks traditionally were very male dominated. People often joke about everything gets done on the golf course, and that was very male dominated. It's great to see now we have more and more females, not only in golf but in sport generally. But those kind of, I think, traditional networks were very much focused around males. Again, whilst we've made progress, assertive women are often called, bossy or worse.
Labeled.
Yes. Labeled, yes. Labeled. And whilst I think that's changing, I think that still plays a role. And, typically women traditionally were caregivers. Again, I think we've made progress here. And like I said before, family and flexible policies really help. But traditionally, even women who work still are caregivers for not only their children, but also their parents, as well as the family. And I think all of those pressures mean that time for many women is very scarce. And therefore, going and playing golf because you need to network, that's just not going to happen.
And golf of all things takes 5 hours? It's time with the drinks and all. I don't know, but that's my guess. But okay, still, there is, as we mentioned, a lot of progress, and there are still more opportunities that are opening up for women right now, which wouldn't have been the case in the past. In my personal experience and interactions in my networks, I still see a lot of hesitation, though, for women to like put their hand up and say like, I'm up for it, I'll go for it. And I know that we know also the statistics. I think it was a Harvard study that, men apply for a job when they are 60% qualified, while women feel like they need to be at least 100%, if not overqualified. What is your perspective on that, and what has your experience been?
Yeah, I mean, my experience has been the same. And I think that's something around probably the psychology of women, who feel maybe it's more humble, perfectionism. I'm not sure. I think there's something in the psyche that is, okay, well, unless I tick all these boxes, then I shouldn't, go for that promotion. And I think that's a fact. And like I said, when I was working with the ladies in Professional Women's Network, that was definitely the general consensus was, struggling to push themselves forward, felt quite uncomfortable doing that. And I think there's two things that can really help this. One is around, leadership training and development courses that, are also focused on women's needs, because I think the needs in general aren't always equal for men and women. And so therefore tailoring courses so that, you can have specific training on how to go about this, how to develop the skills, like we said before as well, how to better develop the skills to network. And therefore having really targeted programs is one thing. And I think I've talked about it a lot, but mentoring and sponsorship for me is really critical. And I would say that's what made the difference for me, because had I not been sponsored to go forward to be a GM, I'm not sure I would have come to that conclusion myself, or maybe I would have done, but a lot later in my career. So I think having those interventions with people, and that could be men or women, who sponsor you and who can open up your eyes to the opportunity, I think is critical.
And Helen, obviously this is a theme that you're passionate about and is dear to your heart. First, as a person that's directly affected by it, but secondly, I think it's something that you're passionate about overall. And you've been in the corporate world for a long time. I mentioned my experience during the last decade in a bit of a somber way, maybe. But I'm curious to know, from like all the initiatives that you've seen over the years on developing female talent pipelines in the corporate level, what have you seen working, but also what have you seen not working?
So, what have I seen working? I feel like I'm going to repeat myself, but GSK had a great program which was called Accelerating Difference. And it was a program which was designed to support female leadership. And it touched on topics such as presence, impact, leadership styles. Networking, not so much, but because this was a group of women who came from different functions, different geographies, actually what you did was you did end up building a network of women within the company. And within those forums, people were sharing all sorts of different experiences that they'd had. And this was a great way to learn from others, and start really building your own thinking around what's your leadership style, what's the impact that you want to create, how for women, clothes, makeup, shoes can really make a difference. And again, that was another aha moment for me, because I love heels. Anyone who knows me will tell you about my shoes probably. But it's true that actually, putting on high heels, you feel like you kind of step into a different level of, I guess, confidence. And how you need to find your own way of kind of what's your own, let's say, armor in inverted commas, to really help you be confident, be at your best.
That's a very interesting thing that you're saying. Last week, I was a very busy week and quite hard at work. So I put on heels and people commented on it. And I was like, I just needed to lift my mood up. So I just lifted myself higher.
And you also know me, Christina. Whenever I have to speak in public, I wear a suit because I see myself.
I thought you were going to say you wear heels.
I could try that potentially, but I wear a suit because I know that that's a way that at least I think I look good, and it gives me like the confidence. Because if you don't feel like you're looking good, and it's true, like this, I think there's not enough, maybe like peer groups or theory. Because there's another topic, for example, like all the teachings of speaking in public and so on are made by guys. And there's very little like theory about or practice about like speaking in public for women. So I think that that's like a huge theme. Actually, my mother wrote a book about that recently. So, but she's done communications class for a long time, and she saw there was a gap and not enough theory on how to speak in public for women specifically.
I would love to read that actually. And I will be very blunt and just say it. Like, first time I was speaking in public in a big event, realized that there were like lights. And then my first thought had to be, oh my God, does my bra show through my blouse? And that was the only thing that I had in my head and I had to get over. And of course, nobody is going to teach you how to get over that part and how you handle it because it's not part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
And I guess like that's one of the many things on how leadership courses as well and all those skill trainings are often written by men or kind of like address toward the male audience. What do you think, Helen? You know, guys often get wrong about this whole also equality thing, and how could they be better allies?
I think it's the nuances. So that conversation that we were just having about how you look, how you feel, I think is more complicated for women. So, I mean, and I can tell you a funny story. When I came to Spain, I went to a retailer event and there was like more than 200 people there. And I wore a dress. It was like a black tie, smart. So I wore a dress. And when we got there, out of the 200 men, there were maybe 10 women. And I was the only woman in a dress. And that actually had an impact on me because all of a sudden I thought, I didn't get the memo. Like even women were wearing like smart trouser suits. And I felt, very much like a girl in a man's world stepping into that meeting. And so I think those kind of nuances, it just wouldn't even occur to a man doing a training to even think about that, to think about what to wear, because for men, it's either a suit or it's trousers and a jacket. And that's pretty much it. It's relatively straightforward.
I can also tell you, I mean, this is my humble opinion, that since COVID and the whole thing of like wearing and dressing better and worse, I think that also some guys need some retraining on how to dress, what to wear in like public events. But that's probably we should bring Christina, a fashion consultant, one day to the show. That would be an interesting conversation. By the way, I don't want to drop the ball on something that I think is interesting. So from the policies that you've seen, you mentioned one that worked. Now, I think that, humans are known for making the same mistake multiple times. Now, let's help our audience avoid making the mistake again. What policy do you think or initiative does not work? Or if I can say more, even like can be like cringy or something.
So I think when the whole sponsorship of diversity, where it relates to female diversity, is overplayed to the point where you end up in situations which can almost backfire, I would say, and not help the advancement. And I think this is, for me, what I've seen is, in recruitment processes or recruitment decisions, where the decision hasn't been to take the best candidate, but the decision has been a decision that's, to reach a quota number. So for me, I think that's when it really doesn't work, because then it becomes evident that reaching some kind of political, let's say, target is more important than finding the right people for the role. And so they're the situations where I think I've seen it really doesn't work, and I don't think that's helpful. And I don't know, Chris, you mentioned when we were talking at the beginning.
Yeah, quite a bit. And actually, going back to the labels thing, diversity hire, here you go. Then you come up with one more label that can be used, and it's definitely not going to help women and not going to help the equity piece that you're seeking in the organization, ultimately through the diversity, right? But one more thing I want to touch on, because you did talk a bit, for example, about Norway, I believe, as an example that's kind of like a successful one. Ultimately, it is a lot about how the organization is enabling also women to have this time, and there is a lot of time still on women's shoulders, and a lot of things around taking care of the family, kids, or even the elderly. And we do see still that a lot of women might drop out of leadership or pursuing a career around motherhood. So from your point of view, what would be some ways that the organization could set those women up for success and enable them to pursue the career that they want and not having or feel like they're having to drop out?
Yeah, I think on that topic, making sure the right policies are in place in terms of flexible policies that support women as the caregiver. So flexible family policies, having visible role models, I think is important. And, if you can see somebody in your organization who is, at a very senior level and has successfully, navigated raising a family, children, and who has that balance, then I think that's really important. Because then it's almost like you believe it's possible in the organization. And the more of those role models that are visible, then better that can be. I think having, clear goals, clear training programs. So again, how do you support people coming back from maternity leave, for example, coming back into the organization, being clear on what the training development is that those people need in terms of progressing. And again, repeating myself, but making sure that people have sponsors.
Yeah, totally. Helen, what a good conversation. Can only say that. But give us one piece of advice that with everything that you've learned, you would give your younger self if you were able to.
It would definitely be to believe in yourself. So I would say that you have everything inside of you to be successful. So believe in yourself, challenging, and be open to whatever possibilities. And if I can, I have a quote which I absolutely love, which is an A. Milne quote, the Winnie the Pooh. And it is that always remember that you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. And I love that quote. So I guess that's what I would tell myself, tell my younger self.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from Dwyer Partners SL, doing business as the FMCG guys, or the individual author, host, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Dwyer Partners SL. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Dwyer Partners SL expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we presented in this podcast.